is Delaney Murtaugh, and today I will be talking about G.E. Moore's argument of an external world. Now, Moore argues for an external world in his book, Some Main Problems in Philosophy, starting out in Chapter 8 by talking about the existence and space. He takes on many different arguments about his proof in theory of the external world from other philosophers such as Kant and Berkeley, but he also comes up with other arguments he may meet, and he tries to prove them wrong and say that his theory is obviously correct. Moore starts out by talking about objects in space. Moore states that there are such things as material objects, and through common sense we can conclude that we have seen that object. But Moore also states that it is not possible to apprehend every material object. In his book, he uses the example of a penny, and from first glance, we can see the surface of the penny. But upon closer look, you see that you're not able to fully see those lines and those grooves that make up the penny. Now, unless you have a microscope, but even then, you still may not be able to see all of them. From the naked eye, you're able to see those lines of the penny and the curves, but under the microscope, you may see something that is different. Some lines that you thought were straight are now curved. Thus, Moore then concluded that there are many things that exist, even though they're not directly apprehended by us, but sometimes it is impossible to be able to see them. And he does. He thinks that it is impossible for us to be able to apprehend every object. But Moore also argues that at some point, someone, some animal, some man, will apprehend that object, making it real, putting it into space, and making it part of that external world. Moore came up with a proof to defend his argument, and his proof goes as such. Premise 1. Here, holding one hand up is one hand. Premise 2. Here, holding up his other hand is another hand. Conclusion 1. Therefore, there are at least two hands. Conclusion 2. Since there are two hands, there are at least two things to be met with in space. In conclusion 3, therefore, there are at least two things external to our minds. This proof is viewed as somewhat simplistic, and I agree, but I do think that it makes sense, and it follows common sense and sense data. He's able to hold his hand up and his other hand and see that they're in front of his face. He can bang them on the table. He knows that they're there. There's no doubt in his mind that he is not physically holding up his own two hands. Now, since Moore's proof is so simplistic, he does give an argument to prove that his proof is correct. He gave us 3 requirements. These requirements can also be seen and discussed in Scott Soames' book, Philosophical Analysis in the 20th Century, in Volume 1 on page 18. I think that he does a really great job of explaining Moore's proof and these requirements and how Moore believes that they are true. But these 3 requirements are: 1. The premise in the argument must be different from the conclusion. 2. The argument must satisfy, in order to be a proof, is that the conclusion must follow the premises. And 3, lastly, the argument must qualify as a proof if the premises must be known to be true. The first requirement meets the criterion because Moore's conclusion can be true no matter what the premises are. Now, the second requirement is satisfied because the premises can't be true if the conclusion is false. But in Moore's case, his conclusion is true. Now, the last requirement is satisfied because we know through common sense, as we talked about before, that the premises are true. We can see that he is holding up his hands. He knows that they are there. There is no reason for him to doubt that he isn't holding up something of his body, his two hands, in front of his face. Kant and Berkeley are both talked about in Moore's book, mainly more about Kant, though, and how his views were different from Moore's. But their argument does differ in the fact that they believe that nothing can be a part of the external world if it is not directly apprehended. If you're not able to see the object with your own eyes, then you do not know it exists. So, an example that I can give for that would be, even though in my mind, I think that there is, a set of chairs at the kitchen table in the next room. Maybe there's not. How do I know? How do I know that they're actually there? How do I know that they're real? I'm not seeing them with my own eyes right now. How do I know that they're still there? So that's kind of the basis of what Kant and Berkeley's argument was going off of. Now, some of my thoughts on Moore's argument, I do agree with him. Is there is such thing as an external world. And we know this because we can see these material objects, even though we might not be able to see them so in depth as Moore has talked about, but we do see them. Now, an example that I can give is I can walk up to an office building and assume that there must be desks and chairs in there. I don't need to go into the building and see that, but through common sense, I know that there are probably a good amount of desks and chairs for their employees to sit on and use. So I know that those desks and those chairs have already been apprehended by someone using them, thus making them meet in space and become a part of that external world that we've been talking about. But say if I did perhaps walk into the building and then actually see the desks and chairs with my own eyes, I can confirm that there are. But through sense datum, I can feel and see these objects and know that they're there and they're real and that they are met in space, and to be a part of that external world, which would also follow Cotton Berkeley's argument of I did see them. I do know that they are real. Now, some objections to Moore and my argument. I feel that they're not as substantial, but one objection may be if you're not able to see the object, how do you know it's real? And I've already gotten over this, but it is by common sense and sense datum. If I can see the object and touch it, I know it's real, but I can see someone who would think that since I made the claim, I do not need to see the material object to know that it is real. How do I know? Well, I'd have to go back to an example that I'd think of a car. I don't have to see a car in a different state or a different country to know that it is real. Also, someone has probably already seen or apprehended the car, meeting the cars in space and making them a part of this external world. I know that other cars exist because I have one, and that in every city in the United States and other countries, therefore someone else who either owns a car or just bought one apprehended it, and they can feel that it is real. Now, I know that you're relying on other people's apprehensions, but that doesn't make them any less real. A last question that someone could ask, which Moore brought up in his book, is a dream sequence. As Descartes believed, how do you know that you're not dreaming right now and none of this is real? Well, I think the only way to answer that again is with common sense. I know when I'm awake and I know when I'm sleeping. I know that right now I am working on this project. I'm not sleeping. If I was sleeping, I wouldn't be able to operate at the same capacity that I am now. Even when I first wake up, you do not have the same functions. You are slower. You can't operate the same as when you are fully awake. Therefore, in my mind, I know that it's me here pounding my hand on this desk and that that's real. I'm awake. Now, to wrap everything up, I do believe that Moore is correct, that there is an external world outside of our minds and it's independent of us. I feel that he gives a very easy to follow argument, which I think makes it more appealing. Doing all my readings on Moore, I found his theories and arguments to be very interesting, and if you have time, you should consider them as well. I think that you should go back and try and read them as we have in our past lessons. I think that you would really enjoy them. And lastly, I would ask you, what makes you think that there is or is not an external world, and why? Thank you guys so much for listening to my project and proof of an external world, and I hope that all of you have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.